Hi, and welcome to the Animal Training Academy podcast show, the show for animal training and behaviour nerds, where I, Ryan Cartledge, interview the world's most proficient animal training and behaviour geeks. We're absolutely thrilled and grateful to have you here with us today. So make sure you hit that subscribe button on whatever you're listening to this on so that you don't miss a single episode. Each episode of this show is brought to you on behalf of the ATA membership. And if you like the conversations in this episode, then you're invited to continue them with like-minded behaviour nerds within the membership area, which you can find out more about at www.animaltrainingacademy.com. You'll get access to twice monthly live web classes, the back catalogue of previous web class replays, plus a huge library of videos and projects to help problem solve your training challenges. Plus, we're a sociable bunch with an exclusive private Facebook group and forum areas. It's like a Netflix social media platform for animal behaviour geeks. But we will get started on today's episode where we will be talking to one Tony Harvey. Tony is currently the National Dog Training Lead for guide dogs in the UK. He started working in the field of visual impairment 18 years ago for a charity called See Ability. This included working with people with visual impairment and additional needs such as autism and Asperger's. Since 2008, Tony has worked with guide dogs organisations both in the UK and here where I'm currently sat in New Zealand, and also worked with Epilepsy Assist Dogs Trust New Zealand. In 2017, he began using Tag Teach with the guide dog owners he was coaching, and since then has progressed through the levels and is now a faculty member of Tag Teach International. Tony has always had an animal focus, and through his career he has developed a passion for working with people and wanting to apply the principles we apply to our animal learners to his human learners. In his spare time, he can be found in the hills of Scotland with his dog or potentially training geese and goats at home. So without further ado, it's my very great pleasure to welcome Tony Harvey to the show today, who is patiently waiting by. Tony, thank you so much for taking the time to come and hang out with us at Animal Training Academy.
Thanks, Ryan. No, it's obviously a huge privilege to be here. I've listened to so many of your podcasts before. Tui's joined me today. She's just behind me on the sofa there. I have told her there's not much point. It's a podcast, and she's not going to be seen by the whole world. But she insisted on joining me, so she's here with me today as well. But no, I've always enjoyed listening to all the podcasts. I've taken a lot from them as well. So to be here today myself is just a massive privilege.
Well, in the words of Peter Clark, we are each other's antecedents and consequences, reminds Susan Friedman. So it's great to have you here and to get this opportunity to have you share from your experience, your knowledge, which is unique with our podcast audience. And thank you for reaching out to me. Thank you for bravely reaching out to me and saying, hey, Ryan, I think it would be cool if we had a chat and jumped on the show. Really appreciate your courage in doing that.
Yeah, no, I didn't, because, see all these people come on your podcast. I was like, I wonder whether he always contacts them, or is it going to be a bit weird if I contact Ryan just to say, hey, how are you doing?
It's so weird. No, I'm just joking.
That's what I thought. And then the moment we did, I think Emily spoke to you about it as well. It's like imposter syndrome struck there, and it's like, oh my God, we're going on it. Is this for real? So yeah.
We've all got imposter syndrome. Maybe not Tui there. I don't know if everyone in the the Animal Training Academy podcast audience follows Susan's website, but I believe Tui's been on the Behaviour Works Facebook page.
Yeah, she would have been on there. I think she does some voluntary pill swallowing on that because she was taking U-Move, and I think I managed to get the baseline where she spat the tablet out. She didn't want to take it at all. So then we went through this procedure of getting her to take it voluntary, and then reinforcing it with food straight after. And that's continued even now. So, every day if she has a U-Move, she actually just takes it down like a piece of kibble. Now you can't stop her eating it. So yeah, I managed to get that one on there. And since then, bombarded Susan with various animal training videos with the geese and goats and anything else. And she's always so good, always gives you a bit of advice and then puts it up there as well. Massive support.
Yeah, I think I saw this week you frolicking around in the hills of Scotland with some geese.
Yes, there are 2 rescue geese. It was Orville and Wilbur, because we thought, we took the male geese really, because people don't normally take the male geese from the rescue centres because they like to get the eggs and things. We didn't really want the eggs. We thought we'd take the ones that other people didn't want so much. So yeah, named them after the Wright brothers. They can't fly. I thought it was quite ironic. And then that one of them started laying. So Orville is now Orla. So she started laying eggs. And she wasn't really sitting on them to start with. But I think if you saw the video, I just started to do some target training with her. So I just got her to start targeting a target stick I had. And I'd only had a couple of sessions with her, I think 5 sessions max. And then she decided to go broody then, just as I'd started all my training program. And we didn't want to have the pet geese. We didn't want baby chicks running around, just because part of the reason that we rescue them is just to alleviate the issue of having lots of animals out there that need homes. So I thought, I don't want to break that trust bank that I've spent so long building up with her as well. So I didn't want to have to go in there and turf her off or put my hand under to get the eggs or anything like that. So I thought to myself, I just wondered whether that target stick had enough behind it to maybe get her off in a positive way, to take her from the nest. So I sat in there. And she did. She came off. She took her time, but she came off, and then she started doing the training. So I did a bit of that and didn't rush everything. And then I was able just to go to the nest calmly, just to check whether there's any eggs there or not, and then leave her in peace again. So yeah, felt like a massive win. I think I've cut my head off in the video, but I did have a big grin on my face.
Well, as cute as baby geese would be, what are they called? Goslings? Are they goslings?
I think so. I went with the non-technical baby geese term.
We're a technical podcast show, Tony. No, I'm just joking. I'm just joking. Hey, that's cool. So Susan's been a big influence on you guys over the years?
Yeah, no, definitely. Both myself and Emily. So, we quite often do these videos and edit them, put some music to them. And then we send them to Susan, and she'll normally get back straight away. I think the other day when she got back to me, she said, I'm in the market. I can't wait to watch your video. She's just so reinforcing with all that, isn't she? And then she might give you something, why don't you try this, or why don't you do that? So then you can go away and do it and just do a bit more. And then, yeah, she'll pop it up there, and then she'll even give you feedback to show you how much dissemination it's had over that time as well, so how many people it's reached. So yeah, no, huge influence, huge support really.
Awesome. And you mentioned your wife Emily. We've had her on the show. If you haven't already listened to that episode, depending on when this one is released, you can go back of a previous one or a few episodes ago. So totally pumped to have you on as well. I don't think we've done this before where episodes apart we've had a husband and wife team on, so totally pumped about that. But let's dive into our standard first question. Tony, could you please take everyone listening back and share where you first learned about positive reinforcement animal training and some of the first learners you ever worked with?
Yeah, and obviously I knew I was doing this podcast, and I was thinking about the history of my journey on my behaviour odyssey and how I got to where I am today. And I think I emailed you as well, just to say I don't know what order to put it in. There's like all these different bits here. How do they kind of line up? So it's certainly not a linear journey by any means, but I don't think anybody's is, and I don't think it should be at all, is it? It's how we get there. So this is kind of my journey towards tag teach, I think, and you can see all the elements coming into it. Should have probably put a spoiler alert before that, but this is the general kind of journey. So as a young kid, I was always massively interested in animals, and I used to have my own sort of almost capture and release program. When I was about 7, I used to catch lizards and slow worms, used to look after them for short periods, and then I used to release them back into the wild after I'd kind of studied them and looked at them. And I also had a pet cat who used to support my capture release because she used to catch birds. So I used to rescue the birds off her, nurse them back to health, and then release them again. As I think I always wanted to work with animals, so I think I wanted to be a vet at the time. But academically, I don't think I was kind of ever up there. Me in school, it's fine. I did okay, but I could never put the learning to reality. It never kind of lined up to me so much, so I never really sort of went in, I don't think. So basically, I came out of school, went from all these various jobs, and I was in a heavy metal band, and I had these delusions of changing the world via the medium of heavy metal. But I eventually stumbled across Seeability, which was this residential care home. So it's a charity, and it was with people with visual impairment and additional disabilities. So I went for the job there and I got it, and it was just like I found my place. It felt like I'd found my place. So the people there, I had a visual impairment and normally had an additional disability in like mental health or autism or cerebral palsy and all these kinds of issues. So I started working there as a support worker, and the organisation was very forward thinking. It was very much focused on having this person-centred approach and supporting people rather than caring for them. Because quite often you can have people that will just want to care for people, and there's nothing wrong with that. But I think what we know now, and this is probably going back to what I know now because I certainly didn't know it then, is about that choice and control for people, and how if we can give them more autonomy over the way they want to live, the things they want to do, the way they control the environment immediately around them, it can have a massive impact on their well-being. In particular, there was this one guy I remember working with, and he had cerebral palsy, and he used a wheelchair as well, electronic wheelchair, and he would need to have a drink every now and again during the day. The way that he would do that is he'd had to ask a member of staff, "Can I have a drink?" Which is probably, it could be quite demeaning to somebody, couldn't it? So I thought, how can we make this better? So all I did was I sorted out a drinks table for him, and so we would make up this squash for him. I can't remember what you call it in New Zealand now, but it's where you have a cordial and you add water to it to make a bigger drink. And so I'd set that up, shrugging away there. I've got no idea, but it's definitely not called squash in New Zealand, I don't think. So I'd set it up on the table, so he'd have his big jug of drink and had the cup and the straw in it, and then just coached him how he could pour himself a drink every day. So it sounds really small. So rather than having to ask a member of staff for a drink and waiting for them to be available, he could actually just go in and support himself to get a drink when he was thirsty. So is that choice and control element there? And the other thing I remember doing with him is he had a bed hoist. And when you have a bed hoist to get somebody out of the bed, it comes with 4 buttons. So you normally have your up and your down and your left and your right. And I was always thinking, this can't feel very good, can it? Because you've got no control over yourself. This thing's strapped onto you. You're raised out of the bed. You're shifted across the room, and then you're kind of lowered down into the chair. It had arrows on it, so I would try and give this controller to him as well. But the arrows meant nothing to him. You could have had any kind of image on there that didn't relate to what he understood for the directions. So working with him, I decided to try and label it up for him. So I guess that's a part of Tag Teach coming in there very early, this kind of labeling things. So what we did we had a chat and we labeled it in a way that made sense to him. So we had the down button, I think we labelled green, so that was kind of grass. So grass is always on the floor, so we can understand that. So we had the green button meant down because that's where you're going down towards the grass. So the up, we decided to label that as a blue. So that's your blue sky. So that should hopefully make sense to him as well. So we had his green for down, blue for up. And then on the right-hand side, I believe he had a TV. So I just drew a small line drawing for TV, and that was going in that direction towards the TV. The other direction was the bed, so I just drew a bed there. So I managed to design this system that he was able to understand, which just meant that in the mornings when we're going to do that morning routine, we could give him the controller so he would be able to at least have that control over his movements going from the bed into the chair as well. And with all these things, both these things I set up or anything else I set up, if any staff came in and didn't do it or just tried to do it for him, I was always, I don't really get irate, but I remember just, let him do it. We set it up so he can have that control over what's happening to him, because I think it's really important. And all those there were so many people there, so many stories from that time, but it was all about that empowerment and giving people that choice and control over their lives as much as we can. One aspect that always really interested me at that time was the orientation aspect to it, so how people would navigate around the environment with a visual impairment. And in seeability, that was generally with a long cane. People had additional disabilities, and most people in this home wouldn't have been able to have a guide dog really, just because everything else going on. But they would use a long cane to navigate, and I used to find that fascinating. How do you use the landmarks and all those clues that they're able to build up that kind of mental image of how to get from A to B, how to get there to do their shopping, or how to get there to go to the bank. And that's something that I always wanted to get into. And around the same time, we did have somebody who used to visit the home who was a guide dog owner who used to come up and talk to the residents up there as well. And then there's this random story about how I met this couple from Guide Dogs while I was on a holiday, and I was talking to them about it, just going off on one like I do, telling them about all the stuff I was doing, and they just said to me, "Oh, why don't you look at the Guide Dogs websites, because there's jobs at the moment." And I think that was at 2008. And so when I got home, I went on the website, applied, and it was kind of putting all these bits together for me. So I love the animals from my childhood, and then I've really loved working with all the people that I was working with. So to be able to work with dogs and people, suddenly put it all together. So I managed to get that job, and I remember when I got the phone call as well, it felt like winning the lottery to me, because they phoned me up, and I couldn't get hold of anybody to tell them that I'd got this job, because nobody was answering their phone, and so I couldn't share this joy that I had. So that was how I got into guide dogs. And then there was some, I think Emily would have mentioned it on the podcast that she did as well. So we use positive reinforcement with our dogs, but we also use some traditional methods as well. So it's kind of that balanced training, as we called it then. So you'd have some positive punishment in there along with the positive reinforcement and all the other elements. And we did use clicker. One of my mentors showed me the clicker, but it wasn't really a part of what we did at the time. It was just kind of, this is a clicker. You click it now and again. You can give a bit of food. Kind of no real structure, but just that introduction to it. And then a couple of years in, I think Chirag Patel came to Guide Dogs and he did an input for us, and that was very structured. And that was my light bulb moment as far as that positive reinforcement with this new device, the clicker. It all kind of suddenly made sense to me, and the lights turned on, and I just went away and ran with it, and I started to train all of the dogs that I had with this clicker now, because I suddenly recognised how quick it was and how positive it was, and kind of how fast I could go with the dogs. You know, I could suddenly do all this stuff to push them to really get the behaviours that you want in a really kind of quick and methodical and positive way. And working in guide dogs, you get a lot of practice, because when we were training dogs, you get 3 dogs at a time. You have them on that cycle, then you train them with clients, and then you get another 3 dogs. So you get all these dogs and you're training all day long. So you get so much of this practice. So you can get all your motor skills going well. You're reading the dogs all the time. You're just learning all the time. And leading on to the client work as well, because we were training the dogs with the clients. There came a point where I was working with this lady, and her orientation, the way she found her way around, wasn't the strongest. And I thought, right, I need this dog to really be able to locate these points for her. I need this dog to be, spot on, so he can get her from A to B, because she's not going to be able to recognise potentially when she's deviated from the route that she's on. So I just thought, right, I'm going to use the clicker. So I didn't give the clicker to the person at this point, but I would press the clicker when the dog got to the points I wanted it to, which was normally the up curb or the down curb, or an objective like a post box or the house. And then alongside this, what I suddenly found was I was able to say to the person, when I click, you feed. So suddenly I'd got rid of all this other language which I was using. Like before, I'd have to say, when you get to the up curb, do this, do this, do this. And suddenly my speech and my language suddenly became like Tarzan. It was almost click, feed, click, feed. So that was just a byproduct that I didn't even know was going to be there. And sometimes when you're working with people and you've got food and they're with their dog, people like feeding their dog. They like giving their dog food because it's a way that you bond with your dog. And they would do it at times when you're like, no, please don't give the dog food then. You're going to reinforce something that I'd rather you didn't. But this made it clear. If I hadn't heard the click, they didn't feed. And they would turn around and say, oh, should I give a bit of food here? Whereas before they'd have just given it. So I found it was really precise, really clean, and it really helped with that person and that dog work together. And like you said, came over to New Zealand, worked for the guide dog organisation over there, and I was training dogs there. And I started to teach people with the long cane as well while I was in New Zealand. And it was here that I think I started to hear about tag teach, because in particular, there was one walk where I was walking behind a person and they were tapping the cane from side to side. And I just thought in my head, this would be great with a clicker. I could really get some timing going here or something just to help them. But I really didn't know about the process of tag teach them. So it wasn't until I came back to the UK in around 2015, I think, that I started to develop a lot more what I was doing, because my confidence has built up with what I was doing with the dogs and with the clicker by them. So as I started to work with clients now, I thought, right, I've got this clicker here. Why can't they use it? Why can't this person here take this clicker, do what I've been doing with it? Because effectively what I'm transferring to this person and this dog is the same noise, So rather than my voice saying, good, you've done well, that changing, I've suddenly got this clicker, exactly the same noise. I can hand that to the person. That's one less change for the dog. It's also really precise and clean for the client to use as well. So I started to give clickers to people as well. And I would be very precise with it, because whenever we're doing this kind of work with visually impaired people, we need them to be able to identify what point they're reinforcing. So it needs to be tactile. So we need to have something that's going to be easy to recognise, really hard to miss, and something that's going to be nice and clear. So one of the main things that I would do is ask people to use the clicker when they got to a curb edge. So they get up to the curb edge, they'd be able to identify it with their foot. They could feel there was a curb there, and then they could click, and then they could give the food reinforcement. So some people might say, why do you need to use a clicker? Surely the behaviour is trained by that point. Why should you use it? Or the time is going to be out. The time is going to be way out because they're clicking late. So for both of those points, yes, the behaviour is trained, but so many things have changed for that dog. It's gone to a new environment, it's gone to a new person. To bring in this element of consistency is really a positive thing for the dog. So it's all we're effectively doing is bringing in the same marker. So it doesn't matter that we're not training this behaviour from scratch, but we're just using it to mark the behaviour we want. And in terms of it being a bit late, it didn't really matter by that point because the behaviour is trained. So worst case scenario is that we're just training a bit of duration. So when the dog gets to the curb, if the click's late, it didn't really matter because we don't want the dog to then move off the curb straight away anyway. So started doing that. And then I went on my tag teach course. So I heard that there was a tag teach course going on in the south of England. It was tag teach level 1, I think. And Luca, who was one of the tag teach faculty, was running it. So I went along to that, and that started to really fill the gaps for me. So where I felt like I was doing a lot of things already, this started to fill in all the gaps that maybe were missing for me. So generally, when we used to train guide dogs, or in the past when I used to train guide dogs, we would try and train everything with the dog from the start. So we would give the person the dog, and then we would just go and try and teach, dog distraction, curb work, take the lead here, do this here, all while the dog's there, and try and get everything going with the dog. Once I discovered tag teach and that ability to break down the behaviours, think about your antecedent arrangements, have that clarity of instruction. I never looked back really, and you had the positive reinforcement going on for the people as well. In the past, we might have been very much pointing out what they were doing wrong or what wasn't right as we're following them on a walk, where this was kind of flipping it, and we're taking away all of that part, and we're really starting at the beginning. We're starting at the point where they can't go wrong. And from that point, that was it really for me. Tag teach all the way. And when we started, I should probably go back a couple of steps as well. So when I started introducing the clickers to people, I had to have a way of getting them to understand what we were doing and how to use it and the timing of it. So the way I would do it, I'm sure I wasn't the only person doing this, was that I would have somebody sat in a chair much like this, and I would simply say to them, right, here's the clicker. So you've got the clicker there. All we're going to do now is when I tap your hand, I just want you to press the clicker. So the tap of the hands, like the dog's nose touching your hand or something like that. So that was how I would start to develop that timing for the clicker as well. And then from there, I would develop it onto that curb stop, like I said. There was one person in particular, because some people did say, we shouldn't really be giving clickers to clients, and how are they going to be able to do it effectively and timely. And I did mention this to one person that was being trained, and she was a mum with 5 kids, and she was deeply offended by this because she felt, I've raised 5 kids, I'm sure I can use this clicker and do what you're asking me to. And she could, obviously. It was just something that really helped her and helped her work with her dog. So all that came together, given clients clickers, found tag teach, started to break down all the behaviours and teach it in that gradual kind of process that tag teach is all about. And then steps started to arrive. So that's the standardised training for excellent partnerships with the dogs. And that's the work that Emily was talking about in her podcast. And my work with people and the work with clickers tied in perfectly with all of this. It was like that handover. It's that bridge really from the dog training to the people training. And one of the things that we did find is that quite often the animal training philosophy doesn't always naturally transition to people training. I'm not sure whether you've noticed that yourself sometimes, Ryan, as well, when you're working with the people and animals. You just expect it to, though, don't you? You think, right, I've got all the principles here. What can possibly go wrong? And one of the things is setting your animals up for success. We do that, don't we? That's the natural thing we do. How do we set them up for success? And then when it comes to people, we kind of like throw that out the window almost. and forget about that part. And there was one walk that I was observing once, and this was the dog that was being matched to the person. So when we got a dog and we matched them to the person, we'd take the dog out there. So for the dog, it's a completely new environment, doesn't really know the person, and it's kind of a new experience because they're walking with somebody different and they've got their trainer behind. For the person, they hadn't had a guide dog before in this case, and it was a new dog. So, they're both in this area where it's all new to them. And as they were doing this matching walk, the dog walked over a flat curb, and obviously the person had to bring the dog back to make sure they did it right. And the person that was training him said, "I always like to let the dog make a mistake early on." And I was like, "No, why would you do that? It's a complete opposite of what we want. You don't want any mistakes early on. You want things to be successful early on so that you can build that confidence and build that trust in each other." So that was one thing I think we realised, that we can't just have step. We need to be able to transfer it to the people if it's not happening already. So Tag Teach allowed us to kind of design a class as well, classes when people train with their dogs in that kind of residential setting where they're learning all the skills. So we could start to break it down a lot more. So we would teach them how to press the clicker. We would teach them how to deliver the food in a way to stop the dogs coming across the body. We would teach them to take the lead, and we would do all this stuff quite often now with a stooge dog or with a stuffed dog. So we could practice all of these skills without having a dog there to start with. So we're really building up these behaviours as we go along, and we would do turns like this, and we would build up the walks from quiet to busy, which we did a lot of already, but this was really breaking it down into the individual behaviours so that people were getting it right. And alongside this, I put together a presentation on clickers with clients. I think that's what I called it as well, clickers with clients. So this was just showing all the work that we'd done from that early start that I said with that lady, where I'd click for the dog getting onto the up curb, also including where I would pass on the clickers to people and how you might introduce them to people as well with that hand touch, press click, hand touch, press click. And included with that as well, we would also have that presentation on what this new step class would look like. And myself and this other person, Gemma Dobson, we went around the country to a number of the sites, and we would present on this as well, so that when people were doing the step behaviours with their dogs, suddenly they knew what that kind of end part would look like. Because we were asking people to do things in a different way, which is hard, and the unknown can make you do stuff that you're not comfortable with almost. So you start to doubt yourself. You feel all that imposter syndrome again. So being able to show people what it looked like, I think was a really big part, really. I also continued my own Tag Teach development as well. So I kept working with people, working with all different range of people. And if other GDMIs occasionally would come up to me and say, "Oh, I've got this person here, I think they'd really benefit from some Tag Teach. Can you come out and do some with them?" So I kept doing all of that. And at some point as well, I became a manager as well. So I managed a team of 11 people, and I started to introduce Tag Teach to them. And I developed a Lego game as well, kind of to highlight aspects of what I wanted people to kind of get from the learning. So that I think I tried to incorporate in it what trying to teach everything in one go might be like, and how it would feel for the learner, and how that wouldn't stick. How, if you try to then do all those skills straight after, it wouldn't stick if you were trying to do it all in one go. And that Lego game kind of built up to then setting up your antecedent arrangement right, doing it in stages and building up from there. So I introduced that kind of to the team that I was working with, along with Portal. I brought Portal into some of the team meetings that we had, so people could start to benefit from all of the huge, awesome techniques in there. And then I think during around that time, COVID hit really, so that kind of put a stopper on all those face-to-face aspects that we were doing. But I adapted that presentation, the kind of the Tag Teach presentation, to virtual, and delivered that to our region. And that was partly for CPD, but partly to keep us all interacting, because during that time we were all in lockdown all of a sudden, and we were all at home. So this, not only was it a great way to continue CPD, but it was a great way just to keep people talking to each other and keeping that connection there as well.
I think no one can see this. Tony can see there is a cat currently rubbing against my microphone. So sorry for any distortion. I think thank you for all of that, Tony. There's so many different paths we could explore in your story there. You are a very good passion talker. I love it. I think in New Zealand we call it cordial. What did you call it?
Cordial, yeah.
Cordial.
Squash. Call it squash quite often.
I think we referred to a squash as a type of fruit in New Zealand exclusively. I could be wrong. Type of vegetable.
No,
Hey,
I do remember getting strange looks out there when I mentioned it before. So, yeah.
what was your heavy metal band called?
3 Mile Island.
3 Mile Island. Oh my God. Is there videos on YouTube that we can find?
No, they changed singer after I left. I think there might be a couple from then, but no, thankfully there's none of mine.
Thankfully, I'm sure we can find one somewhere. Hey, I loved your story about helping the client with his bed hoist, and I love that before you told, and I feel like the audience of the show is going to be thinking the same. Before you said what the colour for up was going to be, we're all guessing it already. Like you made that so obvious, talking about grass is green, and then you're like, their colour, I'm like, blue, and you said blue. Hey, Chirag Patel coming to work with you guys, that's pretty awesome. You said that was like a game changer for you?
Yeah, no, it definitely was for me because, like I said, I'd been introduced to the clicker, but I wasn't really using it in a particularly structured way. And the way that Chirag introduced it gave me that ability to think, right, I need to structure what I'm doing a bit better because I'm just randomly clicking at curbs at the moment. I'm not getting any outcomes of it, and I'm not getting any learning out of it for myself or for the dog that I'm working with. So yeah, that's basically what changed to me, that ability to think, right, what do I want out of this session? What's my goals? What's my aims? And what am I working on? So that's what I started to do, yeah.
And I liked I haven't heard anyone explain it, like give instructions like Tarzan. I'm going to use that. Thank you.
Yeah.
And love you playing Portal with people. That's really cool. I got lots of little points I've written down that we could dive into, but I think we're just going to push on looking at the time. But before we do, can you just, I know you run Click Training. Did I get that right?
Click Training, yeah.
Click Training. Can you just share with everyone where they can go to find out more about the work you're doing at Guide Dogs Online and Click Training and get in touch?
Yeah, for Guide Dogs, it's just guidedogs.org.uk, and you can find out as much as you want to really from the website there. In terms of our stuff, that's just on Facebook really. We don't do it for any reason other than to share videos, so that's just the animal side of things that we do, and that's Click Training just on Facebook. So you'll see like the goats there. We've got a few goats. We've got the geese. We've got Tui, who should be on there on some of the videos. I think Emily's done some training of a goldfish on there, getting the football into the goal. So there's a whole load of different videos on there, some husbandry ones, some trick ones, all those bits and pieces. We normally get more out of doing the husbandry kind of behaviours. I think if it's got a real use to it, they're the ones that kind of press our buttons, I think.
Awesome. I think Shrek says, what is it? Husbandry is his agility.
Yeah, I tried not to use that. I knew it would be too obvious where it came from.
I remember the first time I heard that, like that just resonated with me. It's
yeah.
It makes so much sense because it's all behaviour in my personal opinion. So, but I understand doing fun stuff as well, and I kind of want to do more fun stuff. But it's interesting to hear your perspective, and you've taken that same. Do you train? Do you train with your animals like silly things, tricks?
Tricks, yeah. No, Tui's got a few tricks. She'll do she's got quite a few tricks. She'll do like the crawl, and she'll do the play dead, and she'll do all those bits and pieces. The goats and the other animals. So we've done the target training with the geese so far. Just started on platform work. The goats is normally husbandry things, so it's just coming into summer here, so we have horseflies around. So Emily's been training them to get used to that spray of citronella, just to keep the horseflies off. They hate the spray of citronella. Like last year, they would run a mile. So she's actually just in the last couple of days started spraying them on the platform, and they're not running away at all. So she's done amazing work there. I just remember what you said, it's all behaviour, and it reminded me of, I think, hasn't Susan Friedman, she said before, once you put those ABC glasses on, you can't take them off. And that was it for me as well. As soon as I started listening to all that stuff, it just makes perfect sense to me. It just seems so simple, doesn't it? When you start to look at everything like that. So that gave me clarity over everything that we do.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for sharing everything so far, Tony. We'll link to all of the stuff you talked about in our show notes. Moving forward, though, I'm thrilled to have an opportunity to discuss with you Tag Teaching more. Massive congratulations on becoming part of the faculty. That is totally cool. And working with the Guide Dog organisation, some of your human learners, as we've been talking about, are obviously faced with unique considerations. So I'm keen to explore ideas with you about more with you, because we've already talked a lot about it, about your work in this area. Before we dive in, though, for everyone listening, if you haven't already done so, Please go back and listen to some of our earlier episodes, specifically on Tag Teach. We've been so lucky on this show to learn and hear about Tag Teach from so many people, including Teresa McEwen and Joan Orr, and totally inspiring practical appliers like Sean Pogson, to name a few. For this episode, though, grateful to add another unique application of this powerful set of skills and techniques. Tony, can you share with everyone listening, to build on everything you've shared with us already, 5 considerations you make when using Tag Teach with visually impaired individuals?
Yeah, so people that use Tag Teach know that when you're going through kind of the early stages, there can be a part of it that talks about having that demonstration part as well. So that's, the part where you'll demonstrate to the learner what you're doing. So you might tag yourself first so that they can watch you doing the behavior, and then you might get the learner to tag you, and then you might tag the learner. So when I'm working with people with visual impairment, I obviously don't have that option. And I do, on that first course I did with Luca, we chatted about this a lot as well, because I said, I'm working with visually impaired. How can I do this demonstration bit? And we did come up with a few ideas, and we can do sight guiding with people, so that's where they might hold onto your elbow and you can move forward and things. But I think one of the great things about Tag Teach, and one of the really important things when we're working with people, and especially people with visual impairment, is that need not to manipulate people physically and not to take that control away from them. So my first kind of tip for using Tag Teach with visually impaired would really be start from that point of success. So like I've said, we can't use demonstration and we don't want to use manipulation. So we're going to go with that point of success as well. So that's really finding something that you can either explain really clearly in your words, or something that you can capture really easily. So something along those lines, really. And you want to get that buy-in at the same time, and have that understanding from the learner that you're working with, so that you can start reinforcing really quickly. One of the things I might start with very often is we have foot positions in guide dogs. So one of the foot positions will be standing up to the dog's head, or we call it the number 1 position sometimes. So as I'm talking through that, I know that somebody's probably going to go through those actions as I say them. So I always have my clicker ready. So I'll talk through and then I'll press click when they do it. And that's my point of success from there. And then once I get that first one, I'm in. They've started to understand the concept at that point, and I can start rolling with that. So yeah, that would be my first point. Get that point of success. Keep it simple, keep it easy, and get that buy-in really, so that they understand what you're doing. Second point, and I've got this in there because I've done it without a plan before. So it's have a plan. And I think you had Eva on recently. She loves a plan, doesn't she? I think. So yeah, a plan is huge. So Tag Teach happily comes with its very own WOOF planner. So, it's what you want, needs to be observable, one thing, and then you have your 5 words or less for that tag point as well. So there's some behaviors which are really simple, which you can probably get away without a plan. So my other point in having a plan is don't stick to the plan, because I think if you stick to the plan too closely, it means you're not watching your learner, doesn't it? It means you're not observing what's going on. So it's good to have a plan there, because that gives you some direction, but by no means stick to it at all. You need to be really adaptable and move when you need to. The time that I tried to do this behavior, we call it locating objectives, and this was with a guide dog owner. And it kind of needs to be broken down into 2 parts, because there's a few things going on there. And I tried to go in there. I thought I'm quite proficient with Tag Teach now. Go in there, no plan. It was a complete mess. I didn't know what's going on. The guy didn't know what's going on. The dog didn't know what's going on. None of us did. There was clicks here and confusion everywhere. So I've since then I've broken that all down. I've used my WOOF planner. I've got all the different sections, and I even do it in 2 sessions now. So I have the first part of locating objectives. I get that bit good. Then I do the second part separately. I'll get that bit really strong, and then I just put them together, and then you get all of that solid learning without all the mistakes in there as well. So have a plan, make sure there's not too much in there, and don't stick to your plan. Number 3, I reckon, would be involve the learner and build a story. So I've tried to sneak in 2 points here, because I was running out of I really wanted to get in the build a story bit. So I was like, how do I get my build a story in? So involving the learner, you want to use their language. There's no point in using left and right if it means nothing. And you'll know this because you'll talk to someone and you say, put your right foot forward, and you'll see the left one go. And they'll say, no, I know what you mean. I know what you mean. And you kind of know that they don't know what you mean, because you're observing the behavior at the same time. So it's use language which is relevant to the person you're working with. One lady I worked with, left and rights, like I said, meant nothing. So we changed it to the buddy side. Her dog was called Buddy, and we changed the other side was the not buddy side. And from then on, she didn't really make any mistakes. And whenever I had tag points, it would be like with your buddy hand or with your not buddy hand. So everything was named like that. And another way to include people is to ask them what that feels like, because there's no point in saying have a firm grip if firm grip doesn't mean so much to them. But something like, I don't know, what was the one I had? So the one I had, I think it wasn't firm grip, it was loose grip. So that makes more sense. So we want a loose grip on the handle. And so it's like, what does that feel like? And then it turned out we had this discussion. And the reason that she had a firm grip was because she had pet dogs in the past and she always didn't trust them to not lunge off after other things. So we ended up calling the loose grip trust because that meant something to her. She understood why we were using it. So asking people what that tag point feels like normally means it's going to sit there and that learning is going to go in a lot better. They're going to remember that word or remember what it feels like. And I do find sometimes when you ask somebody to name it, the first time you ask them, they might think, oh, this is a bit weird, isn't it? It's a bit silly. But normally once they've done it once and then you go to ask them the second time, it's like second time straight there. They're chucking out the words straight away. So yeah, I'll ask them to tell me what it feels like and get them to name the points. And what I find with this, and this all kind of links in, which is why I've had to build the story part in here, is we want to build a story so that when we're given these tag points, they're not there in isolation. They're kind of building up to a whole big complex behavior or a chain of behavior. So if we were teaching an animal to do a whole set of behaviors, we would back chain them and then put them all together, wouldn't we? This is very similar. So with our tag points, we want them all to make sense. So they all kind of link together. And I always compare it to, if you remember that game when we were kids, and you might say, I don't know, Anne goes to the shop and she buys apples. Then Anne goes to the shop and she buys apples and a fork. And then Anne goes and you kind of build up and each time you add something. So with tag teach, that would be more along the lines of the instructions are, when you get to the curb, step up to the dog's head. Tag point is step up or whatever you've named the tag point. Next time you would say the instructions are, when you get to the curb, step up to the dog's head and press the clicker. Tag point is press clicker. And then you'd add on the next bit. So you'd go through all of that, then give food, go through all of that again, assess traffic. And then what you end up finding then is that the person you're working with can go through that whole story and they'll be able to link every part together as they link all the tag points together, basically. And it tends to sit in the memory a lot easier when you're doing that. Even better, add into that is if they've named things stupid names or silly names, because those are the things that really stick in the memory then. On one of the tag teach courses we did recently online, Joan Orr and Teresa McKinnon have been running some online tag teach courses. And one of the things they were putting together is this Lego piece. And the person who was coaching Luca to put together his Lego model described one piece as the bridge to nowhere, where a piece of Lego was hanging off going nowhere. And I still remember that now. So I remember that she called it the bridge to nowhere. So giving something a unique name like that just gives it massive power. And it really sticks in the memory then. So there, once you've involved the learner, built a story, hopefully they can then talk you through the points. Point 4, I would say keep moving. So don't hang around on your tag points too long. We should constantly be observing our learner. We're looking for fluency in their behavior to understand that they've got it and they're ready to move on. Part of tag teach, you can say we will do this 5 times. So that the learner knows that you're going to do it 5 times. And sometimes that can be really relevant because you might be working with somebody that has autism or something, so they want to know, I'm doing it 5 times, and that's absolutely fine. What I found sometimes, if I say to somebody we're going to do it 5 times, the adults that I've been working with, they might have it nailed after 3 times, and then I'm just continuing for another 2 times because I've said I would. Alternatively, I'll get to the 5th one, which was rubbish. And I think, I need to do a couple more now. But if I say I need to do more, it almost sounds like we failed there or the learner's failed. So I rather just keep to a tag point. And then once we've done it right, then I'll move on to the next one without having to sort of say how many we're doing. And it's remembering as well that if you are working on another tag point and you've moved forward, and if they do one of the earlier ones slightly wrong, don't worry about that. You can go back to that tag point. So if they do an earlier tag point wrong, don't worry. Just keep focusing on the tag point that you're working on, which is a part of tag teach anyway. But it's something I had to get my head around because then you can just jump back a tag point if you need to. And then it's remembering to build in that practice time before you bring in your next tag points. So once you've done all your tag points, you think you've got it smooth, you have to be able to put it all together without relying on you still tagging all those behaviors. So it's kind of like you've glued it all together, go and have a practice, let's check that it's all staying there in one piece. And then if it's not, you can always go and hone those areas that you need to, but they need to have that practice time so it all starts to make sense. I guess it's not dissimilar to what I said about school earlier. I can relate what I was doing in school so much to the real world, so we need to relate all these tag points we're putting together to the real world, and we need to put it all together. And just my fifth point, I think, was do as much as you can without the dog being present, which might sound a bit funny. We're working with guide dogs, but the more you do without the dog, the better you can get all the motor skills. You're not practicing on the dog, so there's nothing aversive going on for the dog at all there. Sometimes it feels a bit slower because you're focusing here. You haven't got the dog there, the dog's somewhere else waiting to come in. But once you get going and you bring that dog back in, everything speeds up a lot more. And when you're working with the dog, if you're using a clicker, you suddenly have to think, is this dog clicker savvy? Because you can't have two clickers going on, one for the person and one for the dog, because that's going to suddenly get very confusing for the dog. So in those situations, I've just developed a shoulder tag that I'll do. So I'll transfer the shoulder tag from the audible tag to the learner before I start working with the dog as well, so they know exactly what I'm doing. So I'll say to them, right, we're just doing this behavior again. This time I'm just going to do a shoulder tag and it feels like this. And I have to always check that they're okay with you touching their shoulder. So I just do the shoulder tag and I say that just means the clicker from that point onwards, so that when we bring the dog back in, as I'm following behind, I can use the shoulder tag as my marker for that behavior then, and the person can use the clicker for the dog. So I think there would be my 5 main points really for using tag teach with a visually impaired learner.
I got 7.
I did try and sneak some extras in.
Did you have more? Like what did you have to cut?
Oh, I don't know. I think I fit it in. But you say, I think you counted 7. So yeah. So I guess there is things that I didn't fit in. So it's how you sell it to people. I guess the industry we're in, people are well aware that we're using clicker with dogs. So there's that association, like, oh my God, you want to train me like a dog. So it's like, how do you sell it to that person? So I've got a variety of ways that I do it. That I normally have this blurb that I have before I start training. So I'll just give a brief outline of where Tag Teach started. I'll talk about the work that Teresa McKinnon may have done with all the gymnasts, and I'll just give it a brief explanation, say why it's so good, because as the gymnast is doing their twist, you can get that precise movement without bringing them out of the learning that they're in. And then one thing that I've done with one person in particular, and this was one of the first times I was using Tag Teach with a client as well, was he had no sight at all, but he enjoyed playing pool. And the way that he would play pool is that he would get you to tap the ball on the table or something, and he would try and line up. So I decided, right, I can sell the clicker here. So I brought the clicker in. So I would hold the clicker above the ball that he was aiming to, so I could press the clicker. Because if I was holding the ball, the moment I had to let go of it, he would lose where it was. So I could have that clicker going so that he would be able to track where that ball was by using his hearing. So that was kind of how I sold it in that situation. To be honest, I haven't really ever had any huge issues with selling this way of working with people, because it tends to work so well and people buy into it. I even had one person at the end of it just turn around and say, thank you so much for understanding me, because she had memory issues and it just wasn't going in, trying our usual methods. She just wasn't able to retain the information that we were giving her. But by using Tag Teach, she was able to really retain it.
That's interesting. So for her, she could create memories based on, you can see I'm going slowly as my brain is articulating this, based on neural connections being made from the sound of the clicker. It's pretty interesting, isn't it?
Yeah, so what's really interesting as well, so this goes back to seeability. And one of the guys I worked with there had only a short-term memory. Like literally, you would have a conversation with him. 5 minutes later, he wouldn't remember having a conversation with you at all. But he seemed to be able to learn. He was hilarious as well. He was absolutely hilarious. But he seemed to be able to learn these new skills. And I always thought to myself, how is he? Because you might have a lesson with him saying, I don't know, teaching him to make a cup of tea or a cup of coffee or something. 5 minutes later, no recollection. You wouldn't have known what he was doing at all. But he would improve at doing that task. And then, eventually he'd be doing it himself without even asking for any help with anything. So to me, the way I thought about it was, when you get a bit of tracing paper, then you might draw an outline of a shape or something like that. And so the way I thought about it and how the neural pathways must be being built was like a bit of tracing paper where you draw a line once, next day you draw another line, then you draw another line, then you draw another line. So eventually you have this really bold image. And that's how I kind of envisaged these neural networks being built to get those motor skills to do behaviors. without it going into that kind of long-term memory where people would remember the sessions.
Are you a visual learner yourself, would you say?
Yeah, probably. I try not to use the labels as well so much, but yeah, very much so. I'll watch somebody and then I'll want to have a go at it. Yeah.
Well, just thinking of your grass is down, blue is sky, and then thinking about your example just then of using trace paper, I'm getting the feeling that and the desire to use labels that you're
Yes.
that the way you're kind of helping people is through your lens of the world and being able to make connections between behaviors and ideas and concepts. And I mean, it's kind of silly to say visual representations when you're working with visually impaired people, but is that kind of making sense to you? Like, do you feel like you see the world differently?
I have kind of been told that sometimes.
Have you? What have people told you?
Yes. Just that I think about things in a different way, or I always approach things in a different way. I don't really notice it myself because I guess it's just the way I think, isn't it?
Yeah.
But no, I have been told that on occasion. But no, you're right. I think with visually impaired people, I always think of it as we're still building a visual map or a visual journey. Because I always think that, well, we know, don't we? If you associate some part of learning with something else, you get a much stronger learning. So if I was teaching a route with somebody, and it wouldn't always be visual, but it could be sound or something like that. So you might say to somebody, when we get to this corner, this is Barky Dog Corner, because there might have been a dog barking or something like that. Or if we're going down a set of stairs like a spiral, I might say this is a helter-skelter spiral, or stairs or something, or this is a corridor to nowhere, or I just give it silly names and stuff which help things really stick in there and get that story and that memory going.
Corridor to nowhere. Is that building from the bridge to nowhere?
Yeah, I think that's probably where that one just came from. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, I feel like, so when you say, would you say visualizations or memories help us remember things? I remember when I was young, someone taught me to remember large lists of items by pairing each item with something silly. The more ridiculous you could pair that item. So I've got to remember apple, and I think about I don't know, a monkey coming and stealing my apple as I sit at my computer desk, which would never happen because there's no monkeys here. I'm going to be able to... Is that what you're kind of talking about? Is that... Can you remember large lists of things?
Sometimes I can. If I put my mind to it, yeah.
Anyway, getting distracted. Number one, start from that point of success.
Yeah.
Number two, have a plan, but also throw away your plan. So if you're tagging now, if you've got a new client and you've got to tag teach a new behavior with this client that you haven't done before because there's some unique variable with this particular context, is your approach now to sit down and get a pen and a piece of paper or open up a Word document on the computer and write it out? Or do you feel you have enough fluency now that you kind of write the plan in your head? How do you operate?
It depend on the situation, really. So if it was going to, so if it's a completely new thing that I hadn't taught somebody before, I do like to have a plan and write one up if I can. And sometimes I just find the writing down will help me remember it because I'll be able to see what it looks like on that bit of paper or on that screen that I've written. So even if I don't have it with me, it helps me. It gets it in my memory for me. So if it's a simple behavior or simple task, maybe not. I wouldn't maybe need to write it down so much, and I might be thinking on the fly as I go. If it's a more complex task, then I'll probably just sit down and go through what I think I might want to do. What I often find is that I might break it down too much when I'm writing a plan, and then when I'm working with a learner, I suddenly find I probably don't need all these little points. I can probably just clump these together, which is absolutely fine as well, as long as you've got that that mobility almost just to skip through as you need and add what you need to.
And do you do the same with training a non-human learner?
Yeah, I'm probably guilty sometimes of trying to jump these huge wedges instead of doing these thin slices. I probably am a bit guilty of doing that sometimes.
Do you write physical training plans still for your non-human learners?
Probably when I'm at work more with guide dogs. Probably when I'm with the animals here, probably not so much, and I really should do.
And how do you teach? Don't tell Emily. She's on the phone. Yeah, did you hear that, Emily?
Yeah.
How do you teach that concept to a new trainer? Write a plan, but throw away the plan.
Yeah, I know. because I think so, people are different, aren't they? Obviously, everyone's different, and that's the whole point of trying not to label people as one type or the other. So some people, when they have a plan, they'll have to stick to it. So I would encourage people to observe the learner, and that's what the focus would be on, is always to watch the learner and look for what those points that tell you that learner's understood it, and then move on. So you're looking for that fluency. And I mentioned that Lego game earlier, and part of that Lego game is including observe your learner. Are you ready to move on? Have they got it? If they haven't got it, you're not ready to move on. And you can test that by sometimes if you put two bits together and they haven't quite got it right, and then you can just stick on that one bit again. So yeah, so my advice would always be just watch what's going on, observe them, so that you can tell when they're ready to move on.
You have sent me an email about the Lego game, and I haven't had time to open it yet. But in 30 seconds, explain for our audience what the. I'm timing you. Go.
Well, well, there is a Lego game part of the Tag Teach course as well, but this was something I kind of, I managed to find some cheap Lego at one of our supermarkets. So I ended up buying like 6 versions of it so I could do it how I wanted it, but it's just a small robot that you had to put together. And so I would have a screen in between these two people working together. One person was the teacher, and they would have the Lego model put together. The other person would be the learner. They'd have all the pieces in a pile to start with. So that would be the first session. So the learner wasn't able to see the Lego piece, and the teacher would have to explain to the person on the other side how to put it all together. So they taught them through it, tell them how to put it together. And then once it was together, the teacher would pull it all apart again for them, dump it all in a big pile in front of them, and just tell them to do it again. And as the observer outside, I was hoping they wouldn't get it right first time, because that would undo what I was trying to show people. So then the second time, it would be laying out all the pieces and kind of the order they'd go together. And you'd be doing that for the learner as well. So you could talk them through the routine of how you're putting it all together. And then it'd be similar. So at the end, you take it all apart again, put it in a pile, and ask them to put it together again. So they might be slightly better at doing it second time, but probably not loads better. So then on the third one, I would have the Lego piece, and then I would also have another set for the teacher, which was all the Lego pieces but broken down into small sections, so maybe just 2 bits together. So they'd have a full piece, and then they'd have another set but just 2 pieces together at a time. And then the learner would just have the pieces that they were working on at that time. So all the other pieces pushed to one side, so they would just have the first 2 pieces they were starting with. So then the teacher would talk them through just putting those first 2 bits together to start with, make sure it's right, and then you can bring in the next 2 pieces and then teach them how to put them together, and then put the 4 pieces together, and then take it apart and then get them to put that together again, and then building up like that. So only moving on when they think the learner's got it. Then at the end of that session, take it apart, leave it in a pile. Can they put it back together? And they normally can by that point, because of the thorough way it's been taught. So yeah, it's just to highlight, really, if you try and teach everything in one go, it might look like they've got it because they end up with the same thing that you've ended up with. But when you test it, they haven't really learned it. And by doing it by that third way, even though it feels like it's taken a lot longer, you've actually taught it. Did that make sense?
Yeah, I just have to get my editor to cut that down into 30 seconds. I'm just so I'm assuming, I want to learn more about this and give it a go. You want to find a Lego set that has a few criteria around it. It's not too hard. It's got a number of steps.
Maybe about 12 to 15 pieces, I think it was. So not huge, not so easy that they're going to get it, straight away when you just do it that first way. Yeah.
Not so they look at it and go, "Oh, that's just a car."
Yeah.
There's the seat. There's the wheels.
Sense. Yeah. No, good point. Yeah. Because that would obviously help. That would be one of your portal things, wouldn't it? Use that object that makes it easier to get to set you up for success. Yeah.
So number 3 was evolve. Number 3 and 4, cheeky, was evolve the learner and build a story. And you shared with us the loose grip example. Number 4, keep moving. Number 5, remember to, I don't even know what number up to now, 6 or 7, remember to build in your practice. I'm just giving you a hard time. Your practice time. Number 6, the more you do without the dog, so work a lot without the dog. And then number 7 was just consider how you sell it to people. How do you think working with Tag Teach and visually impaired people has made you a better trainer of non-humans?
How do I think it's made? Well, I think it's made me really think about. Well, it's made me think about everything, but in particular, that antecedent arrangement is something I I lean on a lot, really. It's one of the things that I think is one of the big fundamentals of all the learning that we do. So I can get obsessed with the antecedent arrangement. Why teach something that could take you a long time if you can do something really simple with your environment that will kind of cure whatever you're trying to cure, or trying to get whatever behavior you want to get. So yeah, I think it's probably think about that. How do I set them up for success? How do I create that environment which is going to prompt that behavior to happen a lot easier, so I can start reinforcing it? So that's probably the biggest influence, I think.
And what a great point. I love antecedent arrangement myself. Hey, thank you so much for all of us. Sadly, we now are at the final question for this episode. Tony, could you please take everyone listening into the future now and share with our audience what you would like to see happen over the next 5 to 10 years in the animal training world?
Yeah, so I was thinking, what improvements do I want to see? And I was thinking about this. You obviously got that amazing podcast about it, that this growth mindset attitude as well. So people being able to show their mistakes as well, and we can't have known then what we know now. It's all part of our journey, isn't it? And I said to one of these, is another colleague from Guide Dogs, Caroline James, who's a massively huge positive influence on everybody that she comes across as well, and a huge influence on all the positive stuff that we've done in Guide Dogs. But I was out running with her, and I said, I wish I knew then what I know now, when I was talking about my time at Sea Ability, actually. And she turned around to me and said, yeah, but that's part of learning. We're not expected to know then what we know now. And I was like, yeah, wow, that's profound. I think that's so accurate. We're not supposed to. We're supposed to get better as we go. If we knew then what we know now, we haven't been on that journey to get where we are. And just having that positive mindset and going into things thinking I can get better, I am going to get better. So if that could come into organizations, into everything that we do, as that should be part of our learning. That should be in our school curriculum, shouldn't it? It's not, I can't do that, I'm never going to do that. For me, I'm never going to be a vet, could never achieve those grades, so I didn't really try. But if I'd have maybe had some of that growth mindset thinking about me, I could have thought, well, maybe there's a different way I can go about this. Maybe there's a way that I can achieve those goals. I'd love to see tag teach as a more recognized method of a way to work with people. I think there can be misconceptions about it in many areas. There's people that are concerned that you're using clickers with people, or it's just like you're training a person like you're a dog, or they feel it's quite constrained because you're limited to the amount of words you can use. And it's none of those things at all, really. It's so person-centered, and it's so adaptable. Once you start using it, it's so adaptable and flexible and positive. And quite often in the general world, when I'm doing other bits and pieces, I was on the running course at the weekend, and when you hear people trying to coach things without this amazing thing called tag teach, it's like, oh, just please tag me. Just, I'll get it if you just tag me. I just want to know where the tag points are. So if we could have it in all these other elements, when you go to learn how to swim or learn how to do this, I think tag teach being integrated into those would just make that learning so much easier for people. Then the other thing I thought about was, I'd love it if social media could become a more positive environment, and if people could just think more about how their actions can affect others, because it's so easy just to put a disparaging comment on something, isn't it? And you forget about it and you go off, but the person that receives that, they're not going to forget about it and go off. It really sticks. And I think over the years, social media has gone from probably this really, really positive place to this place which isn't so positive, and people can be ready to offer criticism when maybe it's not asked for, when maybe we should be supportive and more positive about what we're doing. And in all of that stuff, I'd throw in crucial conversations in there, just so that we can think about how we're talking to people and how what we're saying can affect them, and empathize with people better. And the Happiness Advantage, I think, is by Sean Acker as well. And those sorts of books, that people started to really think about how their actions can affect other people, not just in the real world, but in the virtual world as well.
You're so Animal Training Academy, Tony. I loved it. Growth mindset, awesome. Hey, were you saying that at your running course that you were just at, you're wishing that they understood behavior principles?
Yes. So we were running through some of these drills, and you had to have your feet in a certain position, and it was all very quick. And I was just thinking, just give me a tag point.
Yeah,
I'll get it then. Yeah.
I've been, I think I told you, working with Veronica Patelli from Dog Biz, helping me with some of the business side of Animal Training Academy, and it made me realize I've had other business mentors, the huge difference in having someone who understands behavior science and can break things down for you and reinforce you and like focus on observable behavior. Made me go, like, I never want to hire anyone ever again to help me with anything unless they understand behavior. It makes all of the difference, in my personal opinion. It's interesting about social media. I was talking to Susan about this recently, and we talked about the different reinforcers that people have. And some people are reinforced for having conversations where strong opinions can be expressed, and you kind of go back and forth debating about these ideas, and then the next day, buy a cup of coffee like that conversation never happened, while some other people might perceive that conversation and hold on to that for years. And so the different reinforcers at play is something that I've been contemplating. So I like that you bring that to this question at the end there. Crucial conversations being a great skill to help and always bring into mind how the other person perceives and what they want to get out of the conversation and if they feel safe. So I love it.
I think crucial conversations is like massive, isn't it? It's really affected how I think about everything. And I think people think when you're good at interacting with other people or being that kind of mediator in that role, they think, oh, you're just a natural at it. This is a growth mindset as well, isn't it? They think, oh, you're just natural at it. But the reality is you have to work at it, don't you? And I've had days where I've been in that role and I've been the mediator, and I'm really tired at the end of the day. And I've come, across the corridor into Emily's room because we're working from home. And I've said, I'm really tired. And people just think it's just natural, and it's just not, is it? You have to work at it, and you have to think about what you're doing, and that's part of it.
Yeah, and it becomes easier. But I remember I say this all the time, like when I first entered a conversation and framed it as, here's what I want, here's what I don't want, here's what I want for you, here's our mutual purpose. Man, it felt weird. It felt so weird. Yeah. But it's built up over time. Anyway, let's wrap up the show. Hey, Tony, can you share with everyone, once again, where they can go to find out more about guide dogs, click training, and also get in or find out more about Tag Teach online? Where can people go to find all of the things?
So Guide Dogs for the UK is just the guidedogs.org.uk. For our Click page, that's just on Facebook. That's just Click Training. And the Tag Teach is the Tag Teach International site that's just on the internet as well, which you can just type in Tag Teach and you'll be able to find that easily enough. But always great to go there because they've got that free introductory course as well, so that's a great way in. You get to see a load of videos and it really gives you that nice ease into it, really.
And hey, congratulations on getting to spread ripples via the ChatCon platform. When's the conference again? Can you remind people?
That's a huge honour to be asked to do that, obviously. So you can watch the recordings now. So the way it's being done this year is that everybody's recorded their webinars in advance. So they've been open for people to start watching. And I believe the questions and answers on the 25th and the 26th of June. So all the speakers have their own set time when they're going to be on there to answer any questions that people might have about the presentations that they've watched.
And what's your presentation on?
Creating the problem-solving learner. So it's called It Takes Two, and it's myself and Taylor McCaffrey as well, who's done a lot of tag teaching guide dogs in the UK. And we're just talking about kind of the work we've done there in a bit more detail and about how we really create that creative learner, so that once they've had their training, they go away and with all this confidence with less reliance on us, really.
Awesome. We'll link to ChatCon in the show notes as well, and how you can view these presentations from some amazing people, including Tony Harvey. Hey, this has been so much fun, Tony. From myself and on behalf of everyone listening, we really appreciate you taking the time to come and hang out with us. Thank you so much.
Thank you. It's a real honour to be here.
We do, of course, really appreciate all of you tuning in today as well. And if you have enjoyed this episode and you were interested in carrying on the conversation about working with our animals in the most positive, funnest, choice-rich ways, then as mentioned at the start of this episode, the Animal Training Academy community is waiting for you. Head on over to www.animaltrainingacademy.com and click on the membership button in the main menu to learn more about what members are describing as the Netflix social media platform for behaviour geeks. That's it for this episode though. We're going to wrap it up there. Thanks again so much everyone for listening. You'll hear from us again soon.